Hey everybody, my name is Melissa Lopez, and today we are going to go over the application for the naturalization process. So before I actually begin, I would like to really emphasize that all of the information that will be shared today has been researched from myself and has been gathered from government websites. We got peer-reviewed journal articles, and I was wanting to also emphasize that if one is wanting to go through and continue their naturalization process, that it is best to always contact an attorney, a lawyer, or somebody who works in law to ensure that your process goes through smoothly and that you have the best access to any help that you can get if you're wanting to continue. Okay, so before actually continuing the application that one is required to submit to start the process, there are a couple of requirements that needs to be met before starting the actual application. The USCIS also requires additional requirements before beginning the actual application process. This is one of the requirements is that the applicant must be able to show good moral character, good understanding of U.S. history and U.S. government, of the U.S. government. And the third is that, and might be the most important, is that the applicant must be able to speak, read, and write in English. The United States Citizenship and Immigration Services also require the applicant to be at least 18 years or older to be able to begin the process. This process also would need to work if the applicant has been a lawfully admitted permanent resident for at least 5 years before proceeding with the application. And the actual application does have its name, and that's going to be the form N-400. This form is able to really go into detail into what it is needed for you to really continue this process. This form is very confusing. It does have a lot of it does need a lot of information from the applicant. That is why it is recommended, if one is to apply, to really look into maybe going to an attorney, a lawyer, or looking for any resources that could help one fill out this form as accurately and as legally as one can. One of the first requirements that one needs to be aware of is that the address that will be used on the application, the applicant must have been living there for at least 3 months before submitting the application. To add to that, once the application is completed and submitted, the applicant must also be still living in the same address that they have listed in the application for at least 30 months, approximately 2.5 years, out of 5 years after submitting the application. Since the application is very lengthy and requires a lot of information, being able to submit the application, one needs to have met all of the regulations needed and have met all the statutory requirements that is needed as well. Once the application has met all the requirements and the regulations, that is when the actual good stuff starts coming in. The USCIS then begins looking into who the applicant is. This means that they're gonna be investigating any criminal background that they may have had, examining just the good moral character that they have been within their community throughout the time that they have spent in the United States. It will also review their immigration record to ensure that they haven't been in trouble with the law, whether it's maybe re-entering the country or just getting in trouble with the law in general. After the USCIS investigates and examines the applicant, this next section is where the applicant then is able to study and being able to practice their English skills for this next section of the process. Overall, the entire naturalization test does consist of 2 different parts. So the civics test is going to be a list of 100 questions, and out of those 100 questions, the one who is conducting this test for the applicant will be asking 10 of those questions, and the applicant must be able to respond at least 6 of those questions correctly to be able to pass this part of the test. Going to the English test part of the entire naturalization test, there is going to be an oral test portion, and within this portion, the interviewer will be asking questions about the applicant's actual application, and the application will be should be answered in English from what the applicant has entered, which then would allow the interviewer to ask those questions to the applicant, and that applicant must then be able to respond in English what they had answered in those sections that the interviewer has asked. For example, on the application, the interviewer can ask, what is your current mailing address? And what the applicant would need to respond is they would have to answer with what they had written down in that portion, but it would have to be in English, and they would have to respond. The second portion of the English test would have to be the reading test. In this reading test, what the applicant will be given is a set of about 3 to 4 sentences that the interviewer will be providing for them, and what the applicant would have to do is read out loud at least 3 of those sentences correctly to be able to pass this portion. However, during this part of the reading test, there are very limited words, limited vocabs that will be used in these sentences. So what the applicant can do is study these vocab words, being able to know how to structure sentences correctly, and being able to pronounce these vocab words. And the third part of the English test is being able to write. So this would be the writing test portion of the actual English test. After all these steps are approved and one is able to move forward with the approval from the USCIS, then it is up to them to schedule an oath ceremony for you to be able to give your oath to a judge or an executive branch official. Once all these steps are done, then you are now a US citizen and you have just completed your naturalization process.